Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we bring you a chilling and twisted tale, one of betrayal, deception, and a deadly obsession. This is the story of The Last Christmas Card. A tale of jealousy, greed, and calculated violence. This case will leave you wondering, what lengths will someone go to when their perfect life is on the line? And how could someone so close, someone you trust, become capable of such unspeakable acts? Stay with us as we unravel the dark and tragic story of The Last Christmas Card. On a snowy Christmas Eve, a chilling message arrived at the McAllister home. I know what you've done. By morning, their teenage daughter had vanished without a trace. What began as a festive holiday turned into a nightmare, as secrets long buried clawed their way to the surface, and a sinister game unfolded, one that would leave the family questioning everyone and everything they thought they knew. It was Christmas Eve when the McAllister family appeared to be the picture of perfection. In the small, tight-knit town of Glenview, John and Clara McAllister were well known for their wealth and generosity. John, a successful businessman, had built his reputation on hard work and charm. His wife, Clara, was the perfect complement to his success, elegant, poised, and always with a smile for everyone. Their daughter, Emma, had inherited her mother's warmth and her father's intellect. At 16, she was a talented writer with a promising future ahead of her, and the McAllister household often brimmed with laughter and love. On that particular Christmas Eve, the family gathered around the fireplace in their grand living room, preparing to celebrate the holidays as they always had. The tree, adorned with shimmering lights and delicate ornaments, cast a soft glow throughout the room. Outside, a light snow began to fall, adding to the picturesque scene. It seemed like the perfect holiday, the perfect family, the perfect life. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. John had been acting strange for weeks. He had become distant, withdrawing into his office more often than usual, his smile no longer reaching his eyes. Clara noticed at first. At first she thought it was just the stress of running a business, but soon she couldn't ignore the change. John was no longer the man who held her hand in public, who showered her with affection. He was cold, preoccupied, almost like a stranger. Emma, too, had noticed her father's behavior. She chalked it up to the pressure of the holiday season, the long hours he'd been putting in at work. But she couldn't help feeling a growing unease every time she looked at him. It was as if the warmth that once defined their home had been replaced by something darker, something unspoken. Clara tried to shake off her worries, hoping the festive season would bring things back to normal, but her heart grew heavier with each passing day. She spent her time preparing for the holidays, trying to fill the house with cheer, even as she felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Still, she couldn't shake the nagging thought that something was terribly wrong. Clara, once the picture of warmth, now had a nervous edge to her, always looking over her shoulder. The family's holiday traditions remained intact, but something was off. Clara had been hinting to friends that John had become increasingly cold and unapproachable. Yet, on the outside, everything seemed perfect. The night before Christmas, something happened that only deepened Clara's growing dread. She went out to check the mailbox as the last of the guests for their holiday dinner arrived. Among the usual stack of bills and Christmas cards, there was an envelope that immediately caught her eye. It was elegant hand-addressed in neat, flowing script. No return address. It was unlike any card she had ever received. And something about it set her on edge. She opened it quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside, there was a single card with a simple message, "I know what you've done." Clara froze. Her heart skipped a beat. What was this? Who would send such a thing? She felt a cold chill run down her spine. The words lingered in her mind as she tried to make sense of them. It was a cruel joke, surely. But then again, something about the card seemed too deliberate, too pointed to be a mere prank. The holiday cheer that had filled the house moments before seemed to evaporate. The card lingered in Clara's hands, its message burning in her mind. I know what you've done. Clara stood motionless, staring at the card, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was meant for her, but the idea seemed absurd. Who would send such a cryptic message? And why? Could this be a message from someone from her past? Someone who knew about the secret she had buried for years? A secret so carefully hidden that even John had no idea. She knew it was only a matter of time before whatever was lurking in her past would come to light, but she hadn't expected it to happen like this. With a trembling hand, Clara put the card back into the envelope, the words still echoing in her head. Her perfect family, her perfect life, was about to be shattered. And Christmas, a time meant for joy and peace, would never be the same again. She had built a life with John, raised Emma, and created the perfect family, at least. That's how it appeared to the outside world. Yet this single card, delivered on Christmas Eve, seemed to crack open a door to something darker, something she'd hoped would remain hidden forever. The secret that weighed on Clara's heart was a brief affair she had had years ago before meeting John. It was a fleeting, ill-fated relationship with a man named Patrick, someone she had met in her early 20s. The affair had been brief and passionate, but it ended when Patrick, who had been pursuing her obsessively, became too much to handle. She ended it abruptly, but not before things had gotten out of hand. Clara's guilt over the affair had never truly faded, but she pushed it to the back of her mind, convincing herself that it was a part of her past she would never have to confront. But now, this card delivered in the most unsettling way was forcing her to reconsider everything. Clara had no idea who could have sent it. Was it Patrick, still holding on to old feelings of resentment? What if Patrick had resurfaced? What if he knew about Emma? Or was it someone else from her past, someone who had uncovered the truth? The fear took root deep within her, growing with every passing minute. If someone knew what she had done, if they knew the truth about her past, how would it affect her family, her marriage, her life? The card ignited something in Clara. Panic, fear, guilt. The night passed uneasily, and by the morning Clara couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. As the hours passed, Clara's unease intensified. She shared the card with John, though his reaction was less than reassuring. He brushed it off as a prank, perhaps sent by a jealous acquaintance or a disgruntled business associate. Yet, even as he reassured her, Clara couldn't shake the sense that something was terribly wrong. John had always been the rock in their family, steady and unwavering, but his dismissive attitude only deepened her anxiety. How could he be so calm when something so unnerving had just landed in their home? That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed beside John, but her thoughts were a million miles away. What if the sender of the card wasn't just targeting her? What if this was somehow connected to Emma? The thought made her stomach turn. She thought about the way John had been acting lately, how distant he had become over the past few months. He had always been attentive to Emma, a doting father who would do anything to protect her. But what if something had changed? What if the threat was closer to home than she wanted to admit? The next morning, Clara felt like a stranger in her own home. She kept her distance from John, unsure of what to believe anymore. The card was still in her purse, its message etched into her mind. As the day wore on, the fear grew harder to ignore. Clara couldn't shake the sense that someone was watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Little did Clara know her past was about to come crashing into her present with deadly consequences. And then, as the Christmas morning dawned in the McAllister household, the usual joy and warmth were nowhere to be found. Instead, there was panic, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of dread. Emma went missing. Her bedroom, which she had carefully decorated for the holidays, was empty. The bed was unmade, her favorite books scattered on the floor. The window, slightly ajar, let in the cold night air, and there was no sign of her anywhere, no phone calls, no messages, just the eerie silence of a teenage girl gone without a trace. Clara's heart dropped into her stomach. The silence in the house felt suffocating. At first, Clara tried to convince herself that Emma had simply gone for a walk or was playing some sort of prank, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. Panic set in. Clara and John searched the house frantically, but Emma was nowhere to be found. There was no note, no explanation, just the eerie feeling that something was terribly wrong. The uncertainty was unbearable. Clara's heart raced as she thought about the card, the secret, and the chilling possibility that someone knew everything. Emma's disappearance wasn't just an isolated event, it was the beginning of something far darker. The police arrived within the hour, and their search began. Officers combed through every inch of the house, looking for any clues that might explain Emma's sudden disappearance. The only thing out of the ordinary was the open window, but there were no signs of a struggle. The absence of any footprints in the freshly fallen snow outside suggested that Emma hadn't left through the window at all, deepening the mystery. It was as if she had simply vanished. As the investigation continued, the officers discovered something chilling. In Emma's diary, tucked between its pages, was another card identical to the one Clara had received. The handwriting was the same, the neat and deliberate script unmistakable. The message inside this card, however, was far more sinister. She's closer than you think. The discovery sent shockwaves through Clara. The mysterious sender was clearly watching them, playing some twisted game, and now it seemed that Emma was the target. The diary offered no additional clues. Its entries were typical for a teenage girl's stories about school friends and her aspirations as a writer. There was no mention of trouble, no sign of distress that might have explained why she would leave or who might have wanted to harm her. Clara's fear grew as she realized that the cards weren't just about her past. Someone was targeting her family, and Emma's disappearance was no coincidence. John, too, appeared devastated, but his reaction left Clara uneasy. His frustration boiled over as he paced the house, avoiding eye contact with the police and offering little to their investigation. Clara couldn't help but remember his recent behavior, his late nights, his distracted demeanor. As much as she wanted to believe in his innocence, a small voice in the back of her mind kept asking questions she didn't want to face. Could John be hiding something? Was he somehow connected to Emma's disappearance? The mystery deepened with every passing hour. The town's festive cheer had turned to fear. But Clara couldn't stop wondering, could the missing girl be somehow connected to the secret she had buried so long ago? And who was behind the card that had turned her world upside down? And the message from the card echoed in her ears. She's closer than you think. The police widened their search, scouring the surrounding area for any sign of Emma. As news of her disappearance spread, the town's festive spirit quickly turned to fear and speculation. Everyone had admired the McAllisters, but now their seemingly perfect lives were under intense scrutiny. Whispers of jealousy, family secrets, and hidden motives began to circulate, adding to the growing tension. Days passed with no leads, and Clara's anxiety consumed her. She replayed every moment from the past few weeks, searching for anything she might have missed. The card she had received haunted her thoughts, as did the one found in Emma's diary. Both were cryptic yet deliberate, as though the sender was trying to send a message, one that Clara couldn't quite decipher. Who was closer than you think? And why had they taken Emma? Then, in the midst of the search, Clara began to notice strange details. Certain things in the house felt out of place, small, seemingly insignificant changes that only she would notice. A family photo slightly tilted on the mantel, a door left ajar that was always kept shut. She realized, with a chill, that whoever was behind this wasn't just watching them from a distance. They had been inside the house. The sense of violation was overwhelming. Clara felt like the walls were closing in around her, the perfect facade of their lives crumbling under the weight of fear and uncertainty. As she stared at the card from Emma's diary, the words seemed to mock her. Somewhere out there, her daughter was missing, and the answers felt agonizingly close yet just out of reach. The investigation was far from over, but Clara couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her chest. Whoever had taken Emma wasn't finished. There was more to this twisted game, and Clara knew the worst was yet to come. The days stretched into a blur of desperation for Clara as the search for Emma continued. Glenview was no longer the peaceful town she had always known. Fear gripped the community, and neighbors avoided eye contact when Clara passed, unsure of what to say. The police intensified their investigation, questioning everyone in the McAllisters' lives, but no leads emerged. Clara's world grew darker with each passing moment, and the weight of the mystery was suffocating. Clara began to comb through every detail of her own life, trying to understand who could have sent the cards and taken her daughter. The nagging thought that this was connected to her past refused to leave her mind. She recalled her affair with Patrick and his increasingly erratic behavior before she had cut him out of her life. At the time, it had felt like a clean break, but now she wondered if he had spent all these years harboring resentment. If he was behind this, what did he want? And most terrifying of all, what had he done with Emma? John, meanwhile, became more withdrawn. He spent hours in his study with the door locked, claiming he was trying to assist the investigation in his own way, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. She remembered his odd behavior in the weeks leading up to Christmas, how distant he had seemed, how secretive. Her doubts about him began to grow, but she didn't dare confront him. The fear of what she might uncover was paralyzing. Then came the next chilling discovery. Clara was cleaning out a storage closet in the hopes of distracting herself when she stumbled upon a small box hidden behind old blankets. Inside, she found photographs of Emma, recent photos that she hadn't taken. Some were candid shots of her walking to school, others of her sitting in her room, completely unaware she was being watched. Clara's blood ran cold as she realized that whoever had sent the cards had been stalking her daughter for weeks, maybe longer. The sense of violation was unbearable, and Clara immediately handed the photos over to the police. The investigation took a new turn. The police began to focus on the possibility that the stalker had been someone close to the family, someone who knew their routines intimately. The McAllisters' seemingly perfect lives were now an open book, and every relationship, every interaction was being scrutinized. Clara could feel the cracks in their family widening under the pressure. Amid the chaos, a new card appeared. This time it was left on the kitchen counter, as if the sender had walked straight into their home. The message was brief but chilling. "You're looking in the wrong place." Clara's heart sank. Whoever was doing this was not only mocking them, but was always one step ahead. She began to wonder if the police would ever find Emma, or if she would remain at the mercy of someone who seemed to delight in her torment. The card forced Clara to confront a terrifying thought: what if the answers weren't in her past but in her present? She began to question everyone around her. Could one of their friends, or even a neighbor, be capable of something so sinister? The idea made her sick, but it also seemed increasingly plausible. Clara started to piece together fragments of conversations and fleeting moments that had once seemed insignificant, but now felt loaded with hidden meaning. As Clara tried to make sense of it all, another discovery deepened the mystery. The police found a set of footprints in the woods behind their home, partially obscured by the snow. The tracks led to a secluded cabin on the outskirts of town, but when officers searched the property, it was empty. Inside, however, they found evidence that Emma had been there: her scarf, her notebook, and a few strands of her hair. The cabin was eerily clean, as if whoever had taken her had carefully erased all other traces of their presence. The discovery offered a shred of hope that Emma was still alive, but it also raised more questions. Who had taken her there, and why? The cabin felt like a calculated move, a way to taunt the family and the investigators. Clara couldn't escape the feeling that she was being toyed with, that every move she made was being watched and anticipated. As night fell once again, Clara sat alone in the living room, clutching the latest card. The message was clear: whoever was behind this wasn't finished. The game was far from over, and Clara knew that the next move could shatter her already fragile world. The question that haunted her most was whether she would be able to save Emma before it was too late. The air in Glenview grew heavier as the days passed without Emma. The hope that had once flickered in Clara's chest was now dim, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. Every lead had unraveled into nothingness. Every clue had brought more questions than answers. The town's festive decorations, still hanging in windows and along streets, now seemed like cruel reminders of a joy that no longer existed. Clara could barely function, her mind consumed by one haunting thought: what if she never saw Emma again? The police intensified their focus on the cabin, believing it to be a key location in the case. A forensic sweep uncovered faint traces of fingerprints on the scarf that belonged to Emma, but they didn't match anyone in the database. Investigators speculated that the cabin might not have been where Emma was held for long. Instead, it seemed to be a staging area, a calculated move by someone who knew exactly how to avoid leaving any meaningful evidence behind. Clara, unable to sit idly by, began her own search for answers. She pored over every detail of her life, every interaction she had had in recent months, trying to uncover a connection that might explain who was doing this and why. She couldn't ignore the feeling that her past was closing in on her, though no direct link to Patrick or anyone else from her history had surfaced. Yet, the cards, the photos, and the knowledge of her family's private lives pointed to someone who had been watching for a long time. Then an unexpected breakthrough came. One of the officers on the case discovered surveillance footage from a gas station near the cabin. The grainy video showed a dark SUV parked briefly before driving off into the woods. While the footage didn't clearly identify the driver, the police traced the vehicle back to someone Clara knew all too well, John. The revelation hit Clara like a thunderbolt. Her own husband, the man she had trusted for years, was now under suspicion. Confronted by the evidence, John denied everything, but Clara couldn't ignore the mounting inconsistencies in his behavior. His late nights, his secretive demeanor, and his lack of engagement in the search for Emma now seemed glaring. The police began to investigate his business dealings and personal connections, uncovering a troubling web of deceit. Financial records revealed that John had been funneling money into a private account, hiding funds that Clara had no knowledge of. It became clear that John had secrets of his own secrets that might be tied to Emma's disappearance. As the investigation into John deepened, Clara received one final card. It was placed directly on her pillow, a chilling reminder that the sender had access to the most intimate corners of her life. The message this time was simple: she's not far. Clara's heart raced as she read the words, her mind spinning with fear and desperation. If John was involved, had he left this card? Or was someone else pulling the strings, using him as a pawn in a larger, more sinister plan? The police, armed with the card and the evidence against John, searched the McAllister home once more. This time they found something Clara hadn't noticed: a hidden compartment in John's office. Inside was a collection of items that stopped her heart: a bracelet Emma always wore, a crumpled piece of paper with the words "Trust no one" scrawled across it, and a photograph of Emma bound and gagged. Clara felt the room spin as the weight of the discovery crushed her. John was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping, but the case was far from over. Even as he was taken into custody, John maintained his innocence, claiming he had been framed. Clara didn't know what to believe. The evidence was damning, yet the calculated nature of the cards and the stalking suggested a mind far more meticulous than John's. Could someone else have orchestrated the entire situation, using John as a scapegoat? Then, just as Clara thought the nightmare couldn't deepen, she received a call that changed everything. Emma had been found after the police traced the final lead: a remote cabin hidden deep in the woods, alive but shaken, tied to a chair in a locked room. The kidnapper, however, was nowhere to be seen, having fled moments before their arrival. She was unable to recall much of what had happened, her memory clouded by fear and confusion. She mentioned a man, but his description didn't match John. Clara's relief at seeing her daughter safe was tempered by the realization that the true mastermind behind the cards, the stalking, and the abduction was still out there. Among the belongings left behind, investigators found a chilling collection of photographs, cryptic notes, and detailed plans outlining the torment inflicted on Clara and her family. The cards, the stage evidence against John, and the psychological manipulation were part of a larger, sinister game. The mastermind had used intimate knowledge of Clara's past to create chaos, carefully orchestrating every move without leaving a single clue about their identity. It was revealed that Clara wasn't the only target of this twisted game. John had also been receiving cards for weeks. The messages he received were designed to erode his trust in Clara, accusing her of betrayal and hinting at secrets from her past. These manipulative notes explained John's cold and withdrawn behavior, as he grew convinced that Clara was hiding something from him. The mastermind had successfully sown division within the McAllister household, leaving both Clara and John questioning each other at the worst possible time. Emma's rescue brought relief, but the scars of the ordeal lingered. The kidnapper remained at large, their identity and ultimate motive a haunting mystery. The final card Clara received hidden in her mailbox weeks after Emma's return was the most chilling yet. It read simply, "I'm closer than you think." The McAllister family's nightmare was far from over. The kidnapper's ability to infiltrate their lives, manipulate their emotions, and evade capture left a lingering sense of dread. Clara vowed to protect her daughter at all costs, but the fear of the unknown loomed large. Whoever had done this was still watching, waiting, and planning. The McAllister family's lives would never return to what they once were. They had survived this chapter, but the shadow of an anonymous tormentor hung over them like a storm, leaving them to wonder when or if they would ever truly be safe again. As Emma recovered, Clara vowed to uncover the truth. The cards had started this nightmare, but they also held the key to unraveling it. Somewhere in their cryptic messages was a connection she hadn't yet seen, a piece of the puzzle that would reveal the person who had turned her family's life into a waking nightmare. And until that person was found, Clara knew she could never truly feel safe again. Thank you for joining us in this harrowing tale of deceit, obsession, and tragedy. The McAllister story serves as a chilling reminder of how easily a perfect life can shatter when secrets are buried too deep. If you enjoyed today's story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping true crime documentaries. And remember, sometimes the darkest mysteries are closer than we think. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and always keep questioning the truth.